In this Tech Talk, I'm speaking with Grant Olmes, Regional Sales Manager for Kubota Brabender Technologie, and we are discussing the various types of metering technology and how to match specific ingredient needs with the appropriate metering system. Hi, Grant. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Joanie. Thanks for having me back. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. So this is really interesting because there's a type of ingredient that comes with very specific needs. And it's one that I was just talking about the other day, and that's inclusions. Inclusions are really special. And I'm curious, why is proper metering so important for inclusions?
Excellent question. And you're absolutely correct. The inclusion is something that's added or introduced as part of the product that is extra to the standard mix. You know, an example of a finished product with inclusions would be a chocolate chip is to a cookie. And the importance of reliable and repeatable metering of these inclusions is typically due to the specific amount that's required. For example, a chocolate chip needs to be a certain amount to be effective. That's why it's so important that our equipment provide that result of providing the delivery of that ingredient reliably and with very, very high precision. And in combination with that as well, the inclusions are usually expensive. Yes, they're going to be a little bit more expensive. So there's a few layers to why it's so important to meter it properly and effectively, but those are probably the highest priority of reasons why.
Right. You know, I'm sitting here thinking my own personal philosophy is there's no such thing as too many chocolate chips in a cookie. But I know that the truth is, in reality, that is not the case. And like you said, for if no other reason, then they're very expensive. But too many chocolate chips in a cookie could, for a commercially manufactured product, ruin the cookie. So I see where proper metering and precise measurement is so important for inclusions.
Absolutely. And there's quite a few combinations to this inclusion delivery, but these are the top reasons that we hear from the baker and the manufacturer of that product as to why it's so important to keep things very consistent.
Yeah. And you know, aside from my chocolate chips being my favorite inclusion, there are a host of different types of inclusions, and everyone comes with its own set of challenges because some are sticky, some break easily, some have a hard time flowing through the equipment. So what kinds of metering technology are available to ensure that inclusions can get through the ingredient handling equipment? And are there specific components to the metering systems that can sort of help the process?
Yes. So my answer to that question is that in combination with keeping the ingredient moving, because it doesn't move very effectively on its own, we have to come up with agitation elements that make that happen. So our FlexWall technology uses an internal trough that is agitated externally. So we gently massage the ingredient externally through that polyurethane trough, and that keeps the ingredient moving reliably to the screw flights, for instance. So that's one way. We also have an internal agitation element that actually stirs the ingredient, that rotates into the ingredient to keep the ingredient moving reliably. However, there is some ingredients that will flow quite well naturally without having any intervention externally or internally. And those ingredients also would like to be kept in their original state. So we make equipment that has no real mechanical intervention except a very gentle way of moving the ingredient from point A to point B. And that's our weigh belt technology, where we use a belt that accepts the ingredient at the inlet and through the transport mechanism rotates that belt from the inlet to the outlet and meters the ingredient very reliably to the downstream process. The other technology that we offer that creates very little intervention with the ingredient is our vibratory tray technology, which uses a vibrating motor that's connected to a tray that similarly takes the ingredient from the inlet, or from the hopper of the feeder to the discharge point. So those are a couple other ways that we will meter ingredient without having an element of agitation because the ingredient moves viably. And in combination with that almost on its own requirement to keep ingredient moving and reliably to the downstream process, we weigh those ingredients as they're being metered. So our philosophy is the ultimate in high performance plus or minus precision and repeatability for all the equipment that we manufacture.
I mean, it's just fascinating how really precise you can get for a very particular type of ingredient and a particular type of inclusion, that you can really dial it in. That's fascinating.
Absolutely. And it's both processes too, continuous or batch. So when you have a batch, you have a certain amount of ingredient you want to put in the downstream process, and you stop, and then that batch gets mixed up, and then it gets processed from there. A continuous application is we're continuously meeting those dry ingredients into a continuous mixer that's continuously producing dough that's going to the downstream process. So we strive very hard to start with that foundation, with our volumetric repeatability and reliability, and then when we put on the electronics to make this very clear as to what's been measured, that just provides the ultimate combination with equipment.
So, Grant, speaking of volumetric, the last Tech Talk that we visited, we talked about the difference between volumetric feeding and gravimetric feeding. So, is volumetric the specific type of feeding technology that works for inclusions, or is this something that gravimetric feeding would work for as well? Like, can you kind of walk me through how you match the technology with the specific inclusion, and does the type of product come into play?
Sure. To answer your question, there is applications where we're using volumetric technology to provide the result that the client's looking for, and it's very acceptable. But as we mentioned earlier, the inclusions are typically a smaller amount of the bigger recipe, and as a result, they are usually more expensive, and or the amount of the inclusion has to be very careful to being not too much or too little. So in those cases, which are probably more frequent, the client is looking for that plus or minus performance, and therefore we're going to go with gravimetric technology. But it's not to say the client or the baker cannot accept the volumetric repeatability that we provide. It might just be just fine. It just depends on what the end product needs to be, and how the delivery of those ingredients need to be from a plus or minus. We will be the experts though when they ask us, hey, we want to do plus or minus 1% or better. We're going to basically say, okay, this is the product and this is the technology that you should be using, and that would be typically gravimetric.
So how does that process look in terms of finding out, like the fact-finding mission and working with a baker to figure out what technology is the right fit for their process?
Sure. We're primarily interested in what the ingredient is, and what the amount is that they want to meter into the downstream process. And from there, we will be able to use either our experience from many, many years of doing this and having many applications with that same or similar ingredient. However, there is sometimes where the ingredients or inclusions are new, and from fruit pieces to raisins to some things that historically have not been automatically put into the downstream process with feeding technology. So what we will do is we will explore with an ingredient sample, and we'll do some testing right here in our facilities. I'm in our demonstration room right now with some equipment behind us, but we have a full lab that's in our facility where we bring ingredient in and we actually inspect it, review it, and then put it through equipment. And sometimes we make the discovery that what we thought was going to be just exactly what it would be intended for, and needs some changes, whether that's surface finishes. Sometimes we have to make some things different in order for the ingredient to move more reliably, or we need to change the agitation element, or something happens, but we take on that responsibility to test the ingredient so the client doesn't have any surprises when the equipment arrives at their facility. So we'll do that step as well.
Okay. And one thing that I think is really great about Kubota Brabender Technologie is that you do have a lot of experience working with other equipment vendors. So since this technology is something that is sort of part of the ingredient handling process or the mixing process as a whole, really, when you are talking to a baker, you have a lot of experience working with some of the equipment vendors that they already have in their operation, right?
That's correct, Joanie. Yes. And yeah, we spent a long time doing this with some of the largest manufacturers in North America that are material handlers or mixing companies, continuous and batch.
That's awesome. Well, the only other question I have for you, Grant, is what is the best way for a baker to get in touch to learn more?
Yeah, the best way is going to be through our website, and that will provide everything from equipment to products to our stories to our locations. And as I mentioned earlier, partner, as you'd mentioned earlier. We are truly a global company, Kubota Brabender Technologie, satisfying the entire planet. So yes, going there first is a great step to get familiar with our story and how to contact us. Kubota Brabender Technologie, as members of ASB, SNAC, and BIMA, I'm sure we're going to be able to cross paths. If we didn't last week, we will be seeing each other in the very near future. So yeah, we truly want to be part of these communities, and we have been.
That's awesome. Well, I know I did see you at ASB, and I look forward to seeing you at SnackSpo and at BIMA Convention as well. So, Grant, thanks so much for taking time to talk to me about the technology that's available for feeding inclusions and metering inclusions. I think this is a really important part of the process, and I really enjoyed learning more about it.
Thanks, Joanie. Great to see you, and thanks again for having us.